I learned the old egg trick standing at Ma's stove with steam on my glasses and a chipped bowl in my hand. She set 2 eggs into one pot from the same crate, boiled the same way. One had sat on the shelf a spell, one was laid fresh enough to still feel like the hen had signed it. When they cooled, she cracked the older egg first. The shell slipped loose in big clean pieces, and the white came out smooth as creekstone. Then she handed me the fresh one. I picked and peeled and tore it to pieces. Ma just grinned and said, "Fresh is fine for frying. Little age is kinder for boiling." That was the lesson. No lecture, no chart, just proof in your palm. And that is how a lot of Appalachian cooking knowledge came down. Not written, not measured, shown once, maybe twice, then expected to live in your hands. In this one, I want to show you 25 more cooking tricks Grandma never wrote down, including why some folks swore by lard longer than the doctors liked, how poor families made apple pie without a single apple in the house, and the unfinished recipe card that taught me more than any cookbook ever did. Number 25 was the summer trick for tomatoes. When the garden came in hard, nobody had time to fight skins one by one with a paring knife. Ma cut a shallow X on the bottom, dropped the tomatoes into boiling water, just long enough for the skin to loosen, then shocked them in cold water. The peel lifted off with her thumb, fast, clean, ready for canning, sauce, or chow chow. The mechanism is simple. Heat breaks the bond between skin and flesh. The cold stops the cooking so the tomato keeps its shape. Every modern cooking school teaches blanching now, but women on these ridges were doing it because a bushel would spoil while you argued with it. Number 24 was that old egg rule I just showed you. Fresh eggs are harder to peel because the lower pH makes the albumin cling tighter to the membrane. After a few days, the chemistry shifts, and a little air pocket grows inside. That older egg gives you room to work. People talk like Grandma knew the formula. She did not need the formula. She knew the result. If she planned deviled eggs for church supper, she did not reach for the newest ones. She reached for the ones with a little time on them. Number 23 sounds like a joke until you taste it. A pinch of salt in coffee, not enough to make it briny, just enough to flatten bitterness, especially when the grounds were cheap, over-roasted, or stretched farther than they should have been. Salt changes how your tongue reads bitter compounds. That is the science. The old people used the science without naming it. My Uncle Paul said you could tell who had lived through hard times by how they made coffee. Folks who had known want learned to rescue flavor instead of throwing bad food out. Number 22 was the test patty. Before Ma seasoned all the sausage for breakfast, or all the meat for a mess of burgers, she pinched off one little piece and fried it first. That tiny patty told her whether it needed more salt, more sage, more black pepper, or nothing at all. It saved the whole batch from guesswork. Today restaurants call it quality control. Back then it was just plain sense. If meat was precious, you did not season 5 pounds blind and pray over the skillet. Number 21 is the strangest coffee trick on this list, and I watched it with my own eyes. An eggshell, sometimes even the whole egg, went into the coffee grounds before brewing. People still argue about it, but the reason is not magic. The shell adds calcium carbonate, which can soften bitterness a little, and the proteins in the egg can bind with fine particles and help settle the brew clear, the same way clarifying stock works. Camp cooks used it. Railroad men used it. Mountain families used it when grounds were rough and a clean cup mattered. The first time I saw it, I thought Paul had finally lost his mind. Then I drank the coffee and shut right up. Number 20 was fried green tomatoes, and if all you know is the restaurant version, you only know half the story. This was not novelty food. This was a salvage operation at the edge of frost. Cornmeal gave crunch, flour helped the coating hold, salt drew a little moisture first, and hot fat did the rest. Tart green tomatoes stayed firm because their pectin had not fully broken down yet, which is exactly why they fry so well. We ate them because weather was coming, not because somebody invented a trend. You can hear the old economy inside that skillet. Use what the season is trying to take from you. Number 19 was vinegar and poaching water. Just a spoonful, not enough to make breakfast taste pickled, enough to help the loose whites set faster around the yolk. Acid speeds protein coagulation on the outside of the egg, which means less feathering and a neater shape. Grandma may not have said coagulation, but she knew a ragged poached egg from a pretty one. When company came, she wanted the one that looked like she meant it. By the time supper plates hit the table, a lot had already been decided before any recipe began. That was the unwritten part. The choice of the older egg, the spoon of vinegar, the pinch of salt, the little test in the skillet. Small moves, quiet moves, but they are why old kitchens turned out food with such certainty. It was not luck. It was accumulated correction, learned one meal at a time, until the cook could see the result before the pan got hot. If this kind of old knowledge means something to you, like the video and subscribe, because I am trying to write down the things our people trusted their hands to remember. Number 18 is one of the saddest tricks on this list, because it came from shortage. When coffee got scarce or costly, folks stretched it with roasted chicory, dandelion root, barley, or rye. Some drank substitutes straight. None of that was fashionable then. It was necessity in a cup. Chicory brings bitterness and body because roasting creates deep browned flavors similar to coffee, even without caffeine. Dandelion root does something earthier. Barley gives toast. What sounds rustic now once sounded like doing your best while pretending things were normal. I remember an older neighbor saying, "You knew times were lean when breakfast smelled right but did not wake you up." My grandfather said the smell of chicory was the smell of dignity. It let a family set out cups for guests and pretend the cupboard had not thinned. Pride has been one ingredient old recipes leave out, though it shows up in the taste. Number 17, fix the sorrow every pie baker knows: a soggy bottom crust. In our family, there were 3 ways around it. One was to bake on a well-heated sheet or stone, so the bottom got heat fast. Another was to brush the crust with egg white, or sometimes a little flour-thickened filling barrier. The third was simple patience. Let juicy fillings cool before cutting so steam stopped attacking the base. The principle is moisture management. A crust fails when liquid outruns structure. Grandma did not say that, she said. Get heat under it and don't drown the poor thing. Same lesson, better accent. Number 16 is homemade baking powder, and it tells you just how close chemistry lived to survival. If store-bought powder was gone or dead in the tin, people mixed baking soda with cream of tartar, often 2 parts tartar to 1 part soda. The soda needs acid to release carbon dioxide. Without that reaction, your biscuit stays flat as blame. With it, dough rises light. There were variations, and some cooks kept the ingredients separate until the last second to protect the lift. That is not quaint old magic. That is pantry chemistry with supper depending on it. Number 15 was browned butter, though folks did not always call it that. They just knew butter cooked a little past melting took on a nutty smell that made plain cakes, beans, or spooned-over cabbage taste richer than the ingredient list had any right to promise. Milk solids toast. New compounds form. Flavor deepens. That is all the science requires. The old kitchen version required something else too. Nerve. Turn away too long and you go from fragrant to burnt. I can still hear that warning. It'll reward you quick and punish you quicker. Number 14 is switchel, the field drink that sounds odd until you have been hot enough to need it. Water, vinegar, sweetener, ginger, sometimes a little lemon, mixed up in a crock and carried where hay got cut or weeds got hoed. The vinegar and ginger sharpened it, the sweetener restored quick energy, and the whole thing encouraged people to drink more than plain water might. It was not a miracle tonic, and it was not modern sports science either, but as a practical farm drink, it made perfect sense. When I first tasted it, I thought it was too sharp. By the second swallow, I understood why a sweating man might bless it. Number 13 is where the old kitchen starts doing something close to alchemy, boiled icing from almost nothing. Sugar, water, maybe egg white, sometimes syrup, beaten and cooked into a glossy spread that could make an ordinary cake look dressed for company. This was celebration built from shelf-stable things. The trick depended on heat stage and motion. Sugar syrup behaves differently depending on temperature, and egg proteins can trap air if handled right. Translation: if you knew when to stop boiling and when to beat hard, you could turn scarcity into ceremony. That may be the most Appalachian sentence possible. And before we go any deeper, let me say this plainly. The farther down this countdown we get, the less this is about recipes, and the more it becomes about judgment. That is why so much of it never got written. A card can tell you ingredients. It struggles to tell you what ready smells like, what enough sounds like in a bubbling pot, what don't let it go one breath longer looks like around the rim. Number 12 is the one people fight about: lard, bacon grease, and old animal fats. Here is the honest version. Our grandparents cooked with them because they were available, stable, flavorful, and part of the whole hog economy. Lard made excellent pastry because its fat crystals helped create flake. Bacon grease carried smoky flavor into beans, greens, and cornbread. And yes, animal fats can make food deeply satisfying. But the myth that old-time use automatically made them harmless is just that, a myth. Modern nutrition research is more complicated. Saturated fat intake, overall diet pattern, activity level, and replacement foods all matter. Grandma's skillet is not a medical license. What I distrust is the lazy story on either side. Either they ate lard, so all modern advice is nonsense, or they used lard, so they understood nothing. Both are too simple. They cooked in a world with harder labor, less ultra-processed food, and fewer choices. That context matters. I remember asking an old butcher whether he thought the old way was healthier. He shrugged and said, "Healthier than what?" That may be the smartest answer anybody ever gave. Healthier than donuts from a box. Maybe. Healthier than moderation and fresh vegetables and walking half the day. Depends on the rest of your life. The old kitchens deserve respect, not worship. That is how you keep trust with the dead. Number 11 is a good place to start if you grew up hearing warnings whispered over flour bins, weevils. Some people swore bay leaves kept them out. Some swore a nail in the meal bin helped. Some said a few dried peppers would do it. Here is the myth versus fact part. Bay leaves may repel some insects a little by aroma, but they are not a guaranteed defense if eggs are already present in the grain. The real protection was dryness, tight storage, cool conditions, and using food before it sat too long. In other words, Grandma's better trick was often the container, not the charm hanging inside it. Still, I smile when I see bay leaves tucked into flour, because half of food safety is chemistry, and half is memory trying not to feel helpless. Number 10 is the surprise item I promised, apple pie without apples. During hard times, especially when fruit was scarce, crushed crackers got cooked with sugar, spices, and acid, often vinegar or lemon, until the filling mimicked the texture and sweet tart shape of spiced apples. It sounds like a prank until you understand what pie filling really needs. It needs structure, sweetness, acid, spice, and memory. Cinnamon does a lot of heavy lifting, so does expectation. The first time I heard about mock apple pie, I laughed. The first time I tasted a good one, I quit laughing. It was not better than true apple pie. That was never the point. The point was refusing to surrender the comfort of a familiar dessert just because the orchard or the paycheck failed you. Number 9 is how people judged candy stages without a thermometer. They used cold water, drop a little syrup in and watch what it does. Threads mean one stage. A soft ball that flattens means another. A harder ball or a crackling strand tells you the sugar has moved farther. Modern candy books print the temperature chart, and I am thankful for them. But the old test worked because sugar changes predictably with heat and water loss. Hands learned to read texture the way eyes read weather. I used to think that was mystical. It is not mystical. It is trained attention. Number 8 is fried apple hand pies, and if you never watched one made on a floured table with a coffee cup used as the cutter, you missed a little American art. Dried apples were often cooked down first, sweetened, spiced, and mashed into a thick filling that would not run wild in hot fat. The dough had to be thin enough to fry crisp, strong enough not to burst, and sealed like you meant it. Those pies traveled well. They fed field hands, school children, and men who had to eat with one hand free. Portability is part of cooking history people ignore. A food that moves is a food that serves labor. Number 7 takes us out of the stove and into the fire. Ash cake and hoe cake. Ash cake could be dough-wrapped or set near embers, sometimes with leaves or other protection, sometimes dangerously close to actual ash depending on who was cooking and how hungry they were. Hoe cake, in one old telling, got baked on a flat hoe blade near the fire, though cast iron and griddles became the more common route later. Cornmeal, water, salt, maybe a little fat if fortune smiled. That is not much, but it becomes food because heat plus starch plus patience is enough to keep a body standing. If you want the science, starch gelatinizes and sets. If you want the feeling, it is this. Bread made where there was barely a kitchen. Number 6 is the piece of furniture nobody romanticizes enough, the pie safe. Before dependable refrigeration, a vented cabinet with perforated tin panels could protect cooling food from flies and critters while letting air move. That is food safety by carpentry. It also tells you how kitchen space used to think. Storage was not neutral, it was active defense. When I see an old pie safe turned into decor in an expensive house, part of me admires it, and part of me wants to put an actual pie inside and let it remember its job. What joins all these tricks together is resourcefulness, yes, but not the cheerful internet kind. I mean the harder kind, the kind that grows under pressure, the kind that says we cannot buy another one, so fix it. We cannot fetch more, so stretch it. We cannot waste this, so learn from it. That pressure produced ingenuity, but it also produced folklore. Some of that folklore was dead right, some was half right, some was just comforting. The honest work is sorting which was which without mocking the people who leaned on it. I once watched an old woman sort dried beans at a table so scarred it looked topographical. She talked the whole time about weather, neighbors, and funerals, but her hands never stopped checking stones, dust, and bad beans. That was another hidden trick, inspection as routine before supper ever started. And the farther I go into these food memories, the more I believe the kitchen was one of the main places where Appalachia argued with reality in public. A failed crop, a short paycheck, a sick child, a sudden guest, weather moving in, flour clumping, fruit spoiling, wood running low. Every one of those troubles eventually took form on a table or in a pan. Cooking was never only flavor, it was adaptation made visible. That is why I resist the easy nostalgia that paints everything old as pure and wise. Old knowledge includes error, it includes superstition, it includes danger, but it also includes remarkable observation, careful thrift, and a type of intelligence modern people often miss because it does not speak in official terms. It speaks through browned edges, rising dough, tightened whites, settled grounds, and a pie that somehow appears even when the apples did not. Number 5 is coal baking in a Dutch oven, and it may be the best proof that old cooks understood heat better than many of us understand buttons. A proper bake meant coals under the pot and coals on the lid because the food needed bottom heat and top heat both. Too much below and the bread scorched, too much above and the center sulked. People learned ratios by habit, by weather, by wind, by how deep the iron sat, by what they were baking. Biscuits, cobbler, beans, pone, each one asked for a different patience. Modern camp charts can estimate coal counts for oven size, and that is useful, but the real old trick was reading the fire as if it had moods. Number 4 is cast iron seasoning and rust revival. First, the truth that disappoints people. Seasoning is not just grease sitting there. It is oil transformed by heat into a hard, bonded layer that helps resist sticking and protects the metal. Thin coats work better than heavy ones because excess oil turns tacky. Now the revival part. If rust took hold, old cooks did not always toss the pan. They scrubbed it down, dried it hard, and built it back layer by layer. That pan might outlive the cook if treated right. There is a moral inside cast iron, and it is not subtle. Useful things can be restored. Family tools do not have to stay ruined just because they fell into neglect. Number 3 is simpler and deeper than any ingredient trick. The cook tastes everything. A spoonful of beans, a swipe of gravy, a crumb of filling, a finger dab of batter. Not for greed, for calibration. Salt shifts, flour changes. Produce varies. Smoke runs strong one day and weak the next. Recipes are frozen guesses. Tasting is live adjustment. That is why old cooks seemed impossible to imitate. You could copy amounts and still miss the food, because what you were really missing was the stream of corrections between the written lines. Ma never said, "Taste everything," like it was philosophy. She just kept doing it until the rest of us understood that a cook who will not taste is cooking blind. Number 2 is the feeling that lived behind that habit. Your hands know what the card cannot say. Dough should feel like an earlobe, somebody said once. Gravy should coat the spoon, not bury it. Pie crust should come together like it wants to leave. Cornbread batter should pour heavy, not lazy. These are not exact measurements. They are embodied ones. They train the senses instead of replacing them. And I think that may be the real reason so many grandmother recipes disappoint the grandchildren who try to recreate them. The card looks complete, but the missing ingredient was physical judgment. The recipe was never the whole inheritance, which brings me to number 1. After Ma died, we found one of her recipe cards tucked in a church cookbook, written in that slanted hand I would know anywhere. It was for a cake she made every Christmas. The card had flour, sugar, eggs, spice, milk, shortening, and baking time. But then, right where the thing mattered most, the writing went vague. Add enough flour to feel right. Bake till done. Icing, if needed. That was it. The younger version of me would have called that incomplete. The older version of me sees it as a confession. She was not writing a formula. She was leaving a trail marker for somebody who had once stood beside her. Somebody who had seen the batter. Somebody who knew the smell of nearly done. I held that card for a long time before I understood why it hit me so hard. It was not just grief, it was the realization that whole civilizations of knowledge can live below the level of formal instruction, not because the people were careless, because the knowledge itself was partly sensory, partly relational, partly earned by repetition. You cannot fully write down the look on a grandmother's face when she knows the syrup has reached the right stage. You cannot fully write down the pause before she adds more meal, the little turn of the wrist, the way she listens to grease talk. And one more thing about those cards, they were often written after the cook already knew the dish by heart. The note was not the lesson, it was a reminder, a nudge, a breadcrumb. That is why measurements drift, oven temperatures vanish, and instructions collapse into family code. Whoever wrote them assumed the reader had stood nearby once, maybe as a child, maybe licking batter off a spoon, already learning without knowing it yet. That is why these tricks matter to me. Tomato skins, old eggs, salt in coffee, chicory mornings, mock apple pie, Dutch oven coals, cast iron brought back from rust. None of it is only about food. It is about a way of moving through the world that hated waste, distrusted pretension, accepted correction, and kept one eye on survival even during celebration. It is about the stubborn beauty of people who could make a table feel steady when the larger world was anything but. And yes, if you want more of this, I have gathered some of these stories and techniques in one place over on my site. But more than that, I want you to try one. Just one this week. Boil the older egg, salt the coffee, taste before serving, brown the butter on purpose, make the pie that ought not work. Put your hands into one of these old decisions and see if something wakes up. Then tell me in the comments what your grandma, your mama, your nana, or the old cook in your family made that never got written down right. What dish lives in your memory better than it lives on paper? What trick died with them unless somebody says it out loud now? They knew. Now it's written.